There was one time during COVID where I hit like rock bottom financially. The main person that wanted to support me and lift me back up was my mom.
Welcome to Shalin Edit, the podcast where Muslimah entrepreneurs talk about what it really takes to build, grow, and stay grounded. I'm Maisha, and today's guest is Nora, who turns baked goods into edible works of art. Let's dive in. So, Nora, tell us about Nora's Bakery and what it is that you do.
Assalamu alaikum, my name is Nora, and I run a business called Nora's Bakery where I specialize in halal, custom cookies, cupcakes, cakes, and more. And I offer pickup options in Mississauga as well as delivery options within the GTA. And I also do shipping across Canada. I do dietary options as well, like vegan and gluten-free, and then sugar-free, and all of those kinds of dietary options upon request, especially when it comes to my custom orders. I'm nearing the 6-year mark, which is so hard to believe. But yeah, that's a little bit about my business.
What inspired you to start Nora's Bakery?
So I first started baking back when I was 10 years old. I was lucky to have baking classes offered in both my middle school and my high school. I did a cake decorating certificate at George Brown College as well. And before that, I even did some cake decorating classes at Michael's Arts and Crafts store. They had a few that were offered there as well. The initial plan was just to study cake decorating in college right after high school. But before that, I actually did a graphic design program. So I did a graphic design degree, and I did a minor in Entrepreneurship and Social Innovation. Because basically my family was like, get your degree, then do whatever you want. So that's why I did the graphic design first, and then I did the minor in entrepreneurship, and then I did the cake decorating certificate. And then what I did is I just combined all of that to start my own business. It came handy because the graphic design I can use when it comes to designing my own website, and then the entrepreneurship experience definitely comes handy as well. So yeah, it worked out that way.
What's one thing you're excited about right now, like with your business?
Right now, I am excited about a new route that I am taking with my business. Basically, I am planning to incorporate more of my Egyptian culture into my modernized baked goods. So pretty much creating Egyptian-inspired desserts. Specifically, right now, I'm starting with my cheesecake jars. One flavor that I've done so far is the Egyptian mango. For my cheesecake jars. And then I'm also experimenting with a couple of other flavors as well. So I want to essentially have 3 staple Egyptian flavors when it comes to my cheesecake jars. And then I may even consider doing like a flavor of the month, like as the month progresses with my Egyptian flavors and seeing how that goes. And then also with the, like, for example, I currently do Dubai chocolate bars, but I want to do an Egyptian version of my chocolate bars and then have like the filling be basbousa, which is an Egyptian dessert, kind of like kunafa being a Middle Eastern dessert, and like how that's what was done for the Dubai chocolate. And yeah, so that's sort of what I'm leaning towards currently.
Inshallah, yeah, that's so unique. How would little Nora react if she saw you today?
So I feel like little Nora would honestly be proud of who I am today. I feel like it's definitely come a long way. Over the years, I've had a lot of like hurdles and experiences along the way. And then growing up as well, I was the type that like, I guess you can say like I struggled a lot in school. And so like, particularly when it comes to math and science, so the subjects that I was always good at were the arts. I was lucky that I had baking courses in my high school years. So those were the ones that my grades were the highest in. And it was something I was passionate about, so that definitely motivated me to go that route. And so, yeah, I feel like because of all of it I've accomplished so far, little Nora will definitely be proud of how far I've come. Like, I know financially I'm not there yet, but definitely the idea of like pursuing something you love and something you're passionate about is what keeps me going.
You're probably like, to be honest, like one of the few people I personally know who like did something in the end that they actually enjoyed as a kid. So, mashallah, I love that for you. I'm glad you went through with it.
Alhamdulillah, it works out.
Just moving on to like the growth of Nora's Bakery, was there a moment you realized this could be a real business?
Yeah, so it would definitely be when I entered high school. Prior to high school, when I came to my elementary and middle school years, I knew I always wanted to do something within the arts, but whether that be painting or sculpting or something along those lines. But when I entered high school, it was when I realized, wait, maybe I could do something within the baking field instead. And then maybe open my own baking business. So I knew I wanted to do that right from when I entered high school. But it was just like obviously the family aspect that held me back just a little bit of um, like being on track with what I wanted to do, like in the sense that they offered the idea of doing a degree first, graphic design, and then doing whatever I want. But it did work out in the end. I guess the only thing that would have been differently, like how I wanted to do it originally, was basically I wanted to like graduate. What I assumed I would have to do is graduate with graphic design and then actually like work in the graphic design field, maybe for a few years, save money, and then open a store. But then I discovered another option that I could start my business earlier. Because when COVID hit, a lot of like online entrepreneurship programs that were out there. So I actually had the opportunity to pitch my business idea to a couple of programs where I actually ended up winning 2 pitch competitions actually. And so I received a grant and that helped me to start operating out of a shared commercial kitchen. And that's something I didn't know that was out there. So that helped a lot. Basically, you rent out the kitchen per hour whenever you need it, and it helps like cost wise that way, as opposed to having a store and then paying a monthly rent cost. So that was one thing that definitely helped a lot. They encouraged me to start sooner rather than later. So that's another thing that helped me to start then. I started my business in 2020, April 2020, literally 1 month right after COVID. So yeah, I've been doing it ever since then.
Okay, so it's been a while. Yeah, what based off the things that you were saying, this actually segues perfectly into my next question, and that is, has anyone inspired you during your journey?
Yeah, so when it comes to someone that inspired me, I would definitely say um, before I started the business, there was, you may or may not know her. Her name is Reem Ahmed from MasterChef Canada. So she got to be on MasterChef during the early years before I started my business. And she was someone who I definitely looked up to as an inspiration because I remember I had always wanted to also be on some kind of like television sort of series like MasterChef or even like The Great Bake or The Big Bake, I should say, or one of those that are out there. I still would love to make it on one of those someday, but in the meantime, just watching her journey and how much she grew her page since being on that show. And then she would be the type that would like post all her recipes and all of those, all of her creations. And so a lot of the times I would actually remake those recipes and then send her my like behind the scenes, and then she'd like kind of give me critique and inspire me to keep going and one day start my own business. And one thing that I liked as well is that recently actually it was like about a few months back during last Ramadan actually, like she asked me to make her kunafa mango cheesecake recipe. I got to recreate it 7 years later. So that was a fun experience to like go from previous how I made it before to how it turned out now. And then it just kind of felt like a surreal experience. And then because now like right now her focus was cooking and that kind of route. She did do some baking, but most recently she actually started her own baking business as well. So she kind of shifted gears from cooking to baking. So it was interesting to see, like like me being inspired by her, and then now she's almost, I guess you can say, inspired by me in a sense. And so how that all kind of worked out. It was nice to see.
Wow, that's impressive. MashaAllah, I'm so proud. Yeah, so who was the first person that really backed your vision, and what did their support look like?
So I would say this is an interesting question because in my case, I would say it would be my mom. Like, it would be definitely the main one that kind of backed my vision and believed in me. But in the same time, there's a little bit of a funny story to it because I had a bit of an interesting experience growing up in the sense that like I almost felt like I was a bit in competition with my mom because she also had similar passions. Like she studied interior design back home. But when she came here, she wanted to do something different because it was hard to restart her career. So she wanted to do baking as well. And so she wanted to essentially study baking or cake decorating and then start her own baking business. But then I kind of would always like push her to be like, why don't you do something a bit different so that we can both pursue something different? And that's sort of the way I was within my family. I wanted everyone to do something different. But what happened was that she introduced me to like cake decorating program actually at George Brown. And then I noticed that they were offering bread baking courses as well. So I was like, what if you do bread baking and then I do cake decorating? And then that way we both do baking, but different kind of baking. And that kind of worked out because she realized that that was what she was better at anyway. So it worked out nicely in that sense. We both studied at the same time. So it was kind of fun commuting together and then to classes and all. But afterwards, when I started my own business, things kind of changed in the sense that I no longer treated it as like competition anymore. I was more of like, why not come and help me in my business? And like, you can actually start working with me. And then we kind of work together. And so it worked out nicely in that sense. And then she now actually works at a bread bakery currently. You may know of it, or I'm not sure. It's called The Bakers. So basically, they make like manaish and that kind of stuff. And I would pretty much say that she found her passion. And then it worked out nicely for the both of us. So she's definitely the main one that's always encouraging me to keep going. My dad, on the other hand, he's like a bit different. Like he still like encourages me to keep going, but he's always after like it's been 5 years, like I haven't made a crazy amount of money yet or anything. So I'll always feel like like is the business really working? Is it not? Like, do you really want to keep going? Are you ever going to go back to graphic design? That kind of thing. Whereas my mom is like happy where I am currently, and she does believe in the business and like realizes that it takes time and eventually I'll get there. So yeah, I would say my mom would be the one that really has believed in me.
Wow, yeah, that's actually, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm guessing your mom is someone who also pushes you.
Yes, exactly.
I
And
see.
then another thing as well, like I remember there was one time during COVID where I guess you could say I hit like rock bottom with my business financially. And so what happened was the main person like out of my family that wanted to support me and lift me back up was my mom. I couldn't afford the kitchen bill, the commercial kitchen bill at that time, so she lent me the money for it. And then like she was so patient with me, she let me like pay her back over the course of like several months. So that was really nice and sweet of her. And like, thankfully, that was the only time that has happened since. But that was the like why I feel like she'd be the main person that definitely believed in my business and still does.
So, how has building Nora's bakery changed you as a person?
It really changed my mindset, I would say, like going from like treating other businesses or competitors as competitors to realizing that like sometimes there's something called friendly competition. So for example, me operating out of a shared commercial kitchen really got me to notice this as well, because obviously in a shared kitchen environment where you have a bunch of other bakeries operating in the same space, you're essentially working with a bunch of competitors, right? But treating them as a friendly competition instead is what matters the most. Like instead of treating them as competitors, actually helping one another, like telling each other about different events coming up, or maybe help, like seeing the ways that we each work and then giving each other different tips is another thing that I really love about the environment. It's motivated me to like continue operating from there over the years. So definitely like the mindset shift, looking at competition more of as collaboration.
What's a behind the scenes moment that was really tough that others don't really know about, and how did you deal with it?
Yeah, so this is a very good question because I find what often happens in my business because I am the type that shows a lot of behind the scenes when it comes to running my business, especially online, on social media. And so, like things like showing all of the different events that I take part in, or all of the different orders that I take on, and that kind of work. And a lot of the times, people will assume that I'm really doing amazing in the business and that I'm probably making a lot of money, when that may not always be the case. Sometimes, obviously, you do well, and then other times you may not do as well. And so there are a few times that throughout my business journey in the last 5 years where I did unfortunately hit zero financially. The only difference, though, I would say over time is that when I first started the business, I was doing it in a very chaotic way, I would say, where I was mixing my business account versus my personal account spending. So spending from both. Whereas over time, I realized it's a good idea to separate your business account from your personal account. So like anything personal life kind of expenses, I'll use my personal account versus business account is specifically for business expenses. And that like really helped improve things with time. And so that way, like anytime I hit zero, it's not zero completely. It's zero just in the business account. And then I can always borrow a little bit from my personal savings if I ever need to. So that helped a lot, definitely, when I started doing that. But yeah, I would say that's the main thing that people definitely don't see is how hard it is to run a business, especially currently as I'm operating it full time. Not because it's doing well, but because I really wanted to go full time with the business and like focus on my passion. And I think it's the best way to, with time, help it to grow.
So what's one, well, like practical, to be more specific, what's a practical challenge that you faced and how do you navigate that?
So this is a good question as well, because this is, in my case, this is something that like I would say a lot of people don't know about when it comes to the baking industry in general. So basically, one issue that I faced is that a lot of the times people don't know that running a home-based baking business is actually not allowed in Mississauga, in the Peel region, so Mississauga, Brampton, and Caledon, and then also the York region. Whereas if you have a home-based baking business outside of that region, let's say you live in Burlington or Ajax or Milton, all of those areas do allow home-based baking businesses. And I find that like it creates a bit of an unfair sort of advantage because those people that are operating outside of those regions are making money in their business a lot more than I guess I am because I have the overhead costs of the commercial kitchen, which is not cheap. It is cheaper than having your own store, but it's still an added expense. And so it's just, I feel like there should be more consistency. Like I would love down the road to see things change, whether they allow home-based baking businesses all across the GTA or just not allow it all across the GTA, like one or the other. Like having it the way it is currently is creating that unfair scenario. And then a lot of the times as well is that there's a lot of home-based baking businesses that don't know about the rules and they're taking the risk. And then sometimes they get away with it. They don't get in trouble and they're making money, but then I'm not making money. You know what I mean? So there's that issue that I would say I would love to see change down the road. Because there's a lot of expenses that are involved when it comes to running a business, from ingredient costs to supplies to the kitchen costs. And then a lot of people don't end up even paying themselves. That's another thing you should consider whenever it comes to costing out your products. Remember to pay yourself too. It's not just the cost of ingredients and supplies to calculate, it's your labor time as well.
It does sound like an expensive industry, actually. Yeah.
Yes, there's a lot of expenses. I think another issue as well that I would say is if you're starting off in the baking field, try not to add too many different items to your menu. It's one thing I always fall into the trap of having so many product options that causes more expenses. So I would say start small, like have like maybe one product to start with, and then that way your expenses won't be as high. And then you know if it's going to be a profitable item or if it's not.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you for that. And just moving on to like the faith part. So, do you feel being Muslimah adds extra pressure or judgment online, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, this is another good question too. I actually would say yes, it does add a little bit of extra pressure and judgment in the sense that, like, in my case, my focus is the Muslim community when it comes to my demographic and my niche, and it's always a good idea to have a specific niche that you're focusing on. And so whenever I do events outside of that community, this is where I notice that pressure and the judgment a little bit. I don't know if it's necessary because of this or not, but I feel like sometimes the non-Muslims like become a little bit more, I guess, shy to approach my booth, or maybe because it's just a brand new audience of people every time whenever I do events outside of the Muslim community, versus when I do Muslim community events, I often see a lot of repeat customers or familiar faces. And then that helps a lot because once you build that consistent repeat customers, that's a great way to start building your business up. And then I do a lot better at events that involve the Muslim communities. So one thing I definitely want to do going forward is to cut back on the non-Muslim community events and stick with my demographic and my target audience. When I first started the business, like my main target audience was young Muslim women, I would say, and that is has still been the case. Particularly young Muslim women with kids as well. So because kids always love cake pops and things like that. So that's what I would say my main demographic is.
How does your faith define like success to you? especially compared to what society usually pushes?
Society, I would say, measures success more by like wealth and status and constant productivity. Whereas like in Islam, success is more understood through like intention and like reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And like as long as your intentions are like sincere and your work pleases Allah, like the effort itself is meaningful. And even if success, you don't really see it immediately, as long as it's visible, that's what matters. Having that kind of perspective is the best way to run your business, I would say. And like I said earlier, like I started my baking business focusing on halal options to be more accessible. And then like over time, I actually realized that that inspired a lot of other businesses, like within the commercial kitchen that I operate currently in. I like a lot of the times the bakers would like offer me different baked goods, and then I'd be like, "Oh, does it have vanilla that has alcohol?" And they'd be like, "Oh, I didn't actually know about this. Like that means you can't have it." And then with time, they changed their recipes to have vanilla extract that doesn't have alcohol, so they became more accommodating. And so like creating that inspiring positive change was nice to see. It obviously has its pros and cons in the sense that like I no longer became unique in that specific aspect that I was focusing on, and so that's why I've now pivoted to not just having that be the main focus of the business, but incorporating more Egyptian flavors into my modern baked goods as well. To pivot and become more innovative, essentially, is something that you have to have when it comes to running a business. Mm-hmm. And then one other thing as well, I would say, is that when it comes to my faith, is it definitely taught me to value balance over burnout. One of the biggest reasons I went full time with my business over the past year is that I definitely did not want to face burnout. What was happening was I would be running my business in the evenings and then working for someone else in the morning, like another bakery business in the morning. So it was like a full day of just working. And so I realized that that was gonna slowly cause me to burn out. And so maybe it's better that I step away from the 9 to 5 world and just focus on the business. And that way I have more like flexible scheduling on my day-to-day basis. Sometimes obviously there'll be some sleepless nights, but then as long as you're balancing it out, maybe the week after taking a week off, for example, that's what matters a lot. And what I like to do as well is I like to keep the weekends specifically just for events or hanging out with family and friends. And that way there's that like work-life balance as well.
Yeah, I feel like in Islamically too, because like we're talking about faith and business, balance is such an important thing, but I also like take it into that realm too. Well, yeah, I think burnout is something we all have to watch out for.
Yes, definitely.
Hmm. Have you ever made a business decision like purely guided by Iman, but financially it made no sense at all?
I would say yes. So, for example, like 2 years now, like with the whole like Gaza situation that occurred, and then a lot of us are like boycotting now products that are Israeli, etc. And then I actually discovered that there was a lot of products I was using within my business that were on the boycott list, such as like like Philadelphia cream cheese or Oreos or Ferrero Rocher. And so, even though it technically didn't make sense to remove them from my menu because they were popular flavors, and then it always makes more sense to like spend less rather than more. Like there were other alternative options, but obviously it costs more. But I did feel like it made more sense to take the alternative options. I had basically a small business that approached me from Gaza, and they basically brought all of their products imported from Jordan. And so things like a hazelnut chocolate spread, which would be a substitute for Ferrero Rocher, or a cookies and cream spread, which would be a substitute for Oreos. So that's what I'm using currently within my business. Yes, it may cost a little bit more than Oreos or Ferrero Rocher, but I think it was the better route to take with my business. And supporting small local businesses is always a better option, even if it does cost more to support local than the bigger change. Another thing as well that I also did with my business is I like with the trend of the Dubai chocolate bars. Recently, I have started changing the name for them, even though it's what sells, calling it Dubai chocolate. I changed it to pistachio kunafa because of the whole situation in Sudan that's happening, and that's being caused by Dubai, which a lot of people don't realize as well. One time, at one of my pop-up events, I had called it Dubai chocolate, and then it was actually an event to raise money for Sudan, so it didn't make sense in that scenario to call it Dubai chocolate. So I was like, you know what, I might as well change the name completely in general. Sometimes I'll still refer to it verbally as Dubai chocolate, but on paper, I like switch to pistachio kunafa. Yeah, and then at the end of the day, like all risk comes from Allah, right?
What's one thing people seriously underestimate about starting like a baking business or like doing pop-ups?
Yeah, no, that's another good question. It kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. Is more than anything, a lot of people don't realize how expensive it is to produce baked goods. Like a lot of the times, people think just ingredients, supplies, and they'll just calculate those two things, but they don't realize that there's other overhead costs you should be looking at. And that is whether you have your commercial kitchen costs or even if you're operating from home, there's still overhead costs involved, whether that be the oven, the renting maybe the space in general, or electricity, or there's always overhead costs that are involved that should be factored in. And even if you have stuff like a website, for example, there's that cost per year, right? All of that should be factored in when you're doing your costing. And then paying yourself, like it's so important to pay yourself, like give yourself an hourly rate essentially. Like whenever you're doing your costing, what I like to do is I'll set it up as I'll do like an Excel sheet. I'll have ingredients, supplies, then the kitchen costs, then I'll do the labor I want to pay myself per hour, and then I'll also add like let's say a 30% minimum profit that I want to make per product. So that's usually how I do my costing. That's one tip I recommend for any bakery out there is make sure you do your costing when it comes to figuring out how much to sell your products for, because a lot of times people end up undercharging for their baked goods and then they don't really make money. This is something I notice whenever I do events with home businesses, like their prices will be a lot lower than mine because they don't realize how much expenses they should be factoring in. Another thing as well I would say is that when it comes to pop-up events in particular, it's more a form of exposure more than anything. I basically spend less on like online ads, and I spend less on like Google ads and all that kind of stuff, and then I do events instead as a form of marketing, because I find the in-person marketing is way more effective than online marketing is. Like they both go hand in hand, but that's sort of what I like to do.
Wow, that's actually smart. I never thought of that. But logically, it does make sense now that I'm thinking about it. I really wanted to ask you this question. What's one piece of advice you'd tell like beginners basically to ignore that you commonly hear like people say?
So I would say saying yes to everything in the beginning is definitely a big no. It's something that I fell in the trap of when I first started my business. Any or kind of order inquiry that would come my way, I'd be like trying to figure out any way to say yes to, because it's like, oh, like something better than nothing. But then you don't realize that sometimes taking on a small order is actually going to create a loss than a profit. For example, custom orders in particular. Like I'll never forget when I first started the business, I once said yes to like an order of like bread. I didn't offer even bread on the menu, but I was like, okay, let me experiment and see where it takes me. But then obviously it was like experimenting, and then there's the cost of experimenting, and then like you're providing a product that's not even on your menu. So there's that. Yes, it might make the customer happy, but then you don't realize that customer might come back for the same item that's not really on your menu. And so it's like it becomes problematic in that aspect, or even with custom cake orders too. I actually prefer events over custom cake orders, because what happens with custom cakes is people will send you a design and then you give them a quote expecting maybe it'll take you 5 hours to make, but then you start making it and then it takes you maybe 10 hours to make because it's like a design you're making for the first time. So there's that aspect. So trying not to say yes to everything is very, very important. Recently as well, I noticed this with RIS, which was one of the events I took part in. A huge event. It was my first big event. And then I did make a mistake at that event where I said yes to a last minute wedding cake order. It was a three-tier wedding cake. What happened was I ended up focusing on the wedding cake the night before RS instead of focusing on all the products that I was supposed to make for RS. Like I did have a helper that came in and helped me make a bunch of products for RS, and it worked out. But what happened was the second day of RS, I had to go and deliver the wedding cake order. I initially had planned to have a wedding delivery service. I was going to deliver the order, but that didn't work out, so I had to go and deliver the cake myself. So I had to Uber from the venue, go and deliver the cake, then come back and Uber back to the event venue. So it was just like chaotic. It all worked out in the end. The customer was happy and everything, and it was a repeat customer. I didn't want to let her down. But then later on, this past weekend actually, I had another big event. And then this time I had 2 to 3 cake order inquiries that came through, even though I had so much production to make for this big event. So I was like, maybe I should learn from my previous experience. The temptation to say yes is always there, but I was like, okay, no, maybe I'm gonna say no this time. As tempting as I want to say yes, it's important to say no sometimes. And yeah, I was really thankful that I did say no this time, and they were understanding, the customers. It worked out. I was able to put most of my focus on producing all the products I needed for my big event instead. Sometimes don't be afraid to say no.
Yeah, that's a big lesson we all forget, me included. So thank you for the reminder. If someone were to like start, like let's say right now, like starting a pop-up or like opening up a baking business, what like mini roadmap would you give them?
So when it comes to pop-up events in particular, one thing I would definitely say is a lot of the times people will take part in the big events, right? Like the ones that I took part in recently were attracting anywhere between 15,000 to 20,000 people. And so it sounds amazing, right? When you hear that number, you would think, okay, let's produce a crazy amount of products and probably sell so much, right? But then what ends up happening is you overproduce products and then you end up with a lot of extras and you don't actually get the entire 20,000 people buying from you. Maybe, like, I actually did a rough estimate at RIS how many customers did buy from me at RIS out of the 10,000 people that I would say showed up to the bazaar. And it wasn't as big of a number as I thought it was. It was maybe around the 400 or 500 mark in terms of customers, which is not bad. Like my sales were still pretty good, but it's not like, a few thousand customers that were buying from me, right? It's a few hundred. And so that's one thing I definitely would think about when it comes to doing pop-up events. Don't let the big numbers get to you, because I saw like a recent business as well that just started her business at the commercial kitchen, and she also did an event recently, and she produced like, I think it was like 2,000 cupcakes for a small event. And I was like, at first I was like a bit scared. I'm like, I don't know if this is all gonna sell. And unfortunately, she came back with a lot of extras. So don't let the numbers get to you. I would say produce products based on physical capacity, like in terms of space that you have. Like what I did with RES, as tempting as it was to produce, let's say, $10,000 worth of products, which is what my dad said. I was like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm going to maybe produce $5,000 worth of products. And then that way I actually have space to store all of those products, right? Just in case. You also have to think about like plan B. If I don't sell everything, what am I going to do with it, right? So I need to make sure I have maybe like enough freezer space to store any extras, because with baked goods in particular, I like to actually choose items that have a long shelf life, essentially. So when it comes to things like the chocolate bars, those are an excellent shelf life. They have a 1 month shelf life at room temperature versus something like cake slices with fresh whipping cream or cheesecake jars even. I pretty much stopped selling cake slices at events because of that. Shelf life is not as good when it comes to those items. I've specifically curated my menu at events to be products that can carry on to other events if need be. So I think that's one thing to definitely take in when it comes to doing pop-up events. And the last thing as well would be, if you're starting a business, I would definitely look into making sure that you are doing it the right way. Like if you are wanting to do a home-based business, definitely check your location, see if you're in an area that allows it or not. Because basically, like if you are, in my case, I didn't get approval for my home business because I was in Mississauga, but also because I'm in a residential area. If I was in a commercial area, then they would have given me approval. So check the zoning and all of that before starting. Make sure that you're doing it the correct way.
Because of how like time consuming it does sound, like baking and everything. I was wondering, like, do you have like a productivity hack?
Yes. So I would say, in my case, especially, what I do for the larger events, I kind of split it in a way where I like pretty much spread it out over multiple days, because of the fact that I'm choosing products that have a good shelf life. I'm able to, let's say, pick one product per day and then produce a large volume of it. And then, let's say, store it in the freezer, then pick another item the second day, do a large volume of it, and then do it that way. Like when you focus on one product at a time, it helps a lot. For example, let's say my Dubai chocolate bars is a perfect one to start with. If it's a larger event, since that one has the longest shelf life, that one I'll start with as the first item. And then maybe items that don't have as big of a shelf life, maybe something like my my cake pops, for example, I'll leave those and I'll dip those to like maybe the night before an event. Whenever I'm preparing for an event, I'll give myself usually like anywhere between the 3 to 5 day mark prior to the event to produce everything. And then the commercial kitchen helps a lot because I have like a 20-quart mixer there. I have 2 ovens that each have like 5 racks. We have a walk-in freezer. We have a walk-in fridge. So all of those things like really help.
Okay, well, thank you for the tips. And we're moving into personally my favorite part, the lightning round. All right. So just starting off with the fill in the blank. If I could bake only one thing for the rest of my life, it would be.
So this one's always a hard question, I want to say, only because like it kind of goes back to how I always tell people like try to focus on one product on your menu. But in my case, it gets so tricky because like everything I offer is popular, and so it's like if I really had to pick one item, it's such a struggle. I would probably say when it comes to online orders, cake orders for sure would be my #1 item, and particularly chocolate cake. But when it comes to events, it's a bit tricky because I would say the #1 item at my events would probably be cake pops. Always attracts the little kids. But I want to see how things are going to shift going forward because the 2 items I'm going to start focusing on would be my cheesecake jars and my chocolate bars, and then creating a little bit of an Egyptian touch to those 2 products. So yeah, it's hard to say, but I would say those are the main ones.
It's got me thinking. If you could pick like one product that's your favorite from your menu, which one would it be?
I would say probably cake pops. It's also an interesting one because it's one of those a lot of bakers hate making because they're so time consuming to make. But what helped me sort of to pick up a passion for it is I used to work at a bakery that used to make me dip like 300 cake pops a day. So I got a lot of experience in it. And it's like one of those items that's easy to produce in large volume as opposed to cakes, for example. So I enjoy that aspect, how fast I can make so many at a time. And it's a fun little item to make as well. That still falls under cake, but fast to make.
I had no idea that like a lot of bakers don't like that. Is there like a particular reason?
So a lot of people will say things like, like they have a hard time with dipping the cake pop, and then like the stick falls off the cake sometimes when you're dipping it in the chocolate. That's one thing that a lot of bakers struggle with. Or what another thing as well is that people like to dip it in a different way that I do. After they dip the cake pop, they'll basically have the stick inserted in the styrofoam so that it's like so that's drying as a round shape. Whereas in my case, when I dip cake pops, I have the stick up in the air, and then the cake pop actually sits on a parchment paper on a pan. So it's like the other way. So that method helps produce it more in volume as opposed to the styrofoam method. The styrofoam method is the method most bakers use, but it's a lot slower.
Okay, now I know. So would you rather sell out at a pop-up early or have leftovers at the end of the day?
It almost feels like yes to both in the sense that it depends on your product more than anything. Like if you have a product, let's say that doesn't have a very good shelf life, then I would definitely recommend to produce enough just to sell out. So let's say I'm selling like the Dubai chocolate bars. What I will do with events is I'll pick the item that has the biggest shelf life, like the Dubai chocolate bars, and then I'll produce the most out of that, for example. Then the items that don't have a very good shelf life, let's say my chocolate strawberry cups, those have literally 1 to 2 days shelf life. So I cut back on the amount that I make of those. But I'll still have at least like 1 or 2 menu items that I'll have on my menu where I'll produce a large quantity of. Because in my opinion, I would say it's better to have leftovers. Because you never know how much you can sell at an event, right? I'd rather bring more than less. So that's sort of what I do at events, just to be safe. And then I'll just, while I'm at the event, try to focus on the stuff that doesn't have a very good shelf life to make it sell out first, and then only come back with the stuff that has a longer shelf life.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense actually. Would you rather be baking late at night or early mornings?
This is an excellent one. I would definitely say baking late at nights, because I'm just not an early morning person at all. So yeah, I prefer late nights. And that way I can guarantee that, let's say if I have an event the next day, making sure, like if I rather get everything completed the night before to make sure that, like, rather than doing the opposite, getting up early and then finishing everything right before an event, it's better to have everything completed the night before. So I prefer late nights for that reason.
Okay, that makes sense actually. Um, I was assuming like night owl probably. Because I'm a night owl, that's why.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's what it is. I'm more of a night owl. Like when I used to work at a bakery and would have to get up at 4 a.m. in the morning and then get to the bakery at 6 a.m. I absolutely hated it. So that's why I stopped working there. But now when I have my own business, I actually wake up at like 12 p.m. most days, and then I won't start baking until like 3 to 5 p.m. range. And then by the time I'm actually done baking, it's like midnight. Sometimes it goes into the late night owl to like 3 a.m. range. That's sort of how I do it currently.
Twins, I also frequently wake up at 12.
I love that.
I really want to ask you this. If you could invent a dessert that doesn't exist yet, what would it be?
Yeah, so as I was saying earlier, I like really wanted to come up with something that doesn't exist yet, and I feel like it doesn't. I haven't come across it just yet, which would be creating an Egyptian version of the Dubai chocolate bars. I'm planning to maybe call it Cairo chocolate or Giza chocolate. I haven't decided yet, but something along those lines to come up with something unique in that sense. And then basically, what I would be doing is similar to the Dubai chocolate concept of how they use the kunafa as the filling. I would pick an Egyptian dessert and then use that as the filling of the chocolate bar. So that's sort of the plan at the moment. And same thing with my cheesecake jars. Incorporating Egyptian flavors in those is another unique aspect that I haven't seen been done before either. So I'm excited to see where that takes me.
Yeah, I'm actually looking forward to that. I can't wait to see it launch.
Amazing, thank you.
Last lightning round question. What's one thing people would be surprised to know about you outside of baking?
So this is another really good question. A lot of people don't know this, but I am very open, so I don't mind sharing. I actually have both ADHD and social anxiety, which a lot of people were surprised by. Particularly, I would say the social anxiety aspect because of how open I am on like social media. But a lot of people don't realize that I'm actually more anxious in person than I am on online. So I use social media to sort of be myself, I guess you can say. I love posting on content on there and then showing the different side of me that people don't really see in person. I'm a lot more confident online than I am in person. I actually like to describe my my smile more as like an anxious smile. A lot of people like it though, so that's all that matters. And then when it comes to my ADHD, I struggle a lot with like consistency. So posting frequently on my social media, that's something I need to continue working on. Like being more consistent with content. Like sometimes I'm very active one week, but then I'll go a whole week without posting anything. So I definitely want to start posting more stories. When it comes to ADHD, is the aspect of how I can be both like very messy but also very organized at the same time. So even with the way I work at the commercial kitchen, a lot of the times the other bakers will watch me while I'm working and be like, "Oh, you do things differently," or I'll take like shortcuts. Maybe let's say I'll crack like an egg directly in the bowl. When there's other ingredients instead of in a separate bowl, and then I won't be scared that a shell might fall. I'll like take the risk kind of thing, and usually everything goes smoothly. And then I would describe myself more of an ambivert than an introvert or an extrovert. I'm somewhere in between.
Okay. Yeah, I'm assuming you have a lot of systems in place too, right?
Yes, definitely. It really helps to stay organized. Have like a calendar, like put all of your orders, for example, in a calendar, and then setting out a reminder as well, an alert like the day before the order is due, or maybe a week before the order is due. That really helps me because there are times in the past where I've definitely forgotten about an order, but things have went smoothly where the customer was understanding and I'm still able to get it done within the same day. But making sure you set reminders and alerts one week before, one day before, like multiple alerts really helps you to avoid that from happening in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, I find like even for me, like systems are everything. Like discipline doesn't really work out for me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like I find as well that I'm more deadline oriented. Like I work better under pressure as opposed to like working at my own kind of pace. Like, and so that's why it can get tricky with entrepreneurship, where like the flexible schedule aspect. Sometimes you'll have a goal and then you'll spend months working on it when it could have actually taken you one day if you had a deadline, right? So it has its pros and cons in a sense. I love when I get an order and then it's due on a specific date because then I know that whatever happens, happens, and I will make sure to get it done by that day, and usually all goes smoothly, and I always submit orders on time.
Yeah, I agree. Pressure just, I think it's something that I notice with everyone who has ADHD.
Yeah.
I would say that's like a superpower in a way. If you could send a voice note to your future self 5 years from now, what would you say to her?
I would say, hey, future me, I hope you're still chasing your dreams and staying true to yourself. Definitely remember to celebrate your wins and then trust your instincts and make time for what makes you happy, most importantly, especially for your business. And I hope that you have a storefront by now.
We're here for you, future Nora. What's your no BS message to aspiring Muslim entrepreneurs out there?
I would say start, even if you don't have everything figured out. And your faith, your values, and your skills will be enough. Mistakes will happen along the way, and some days won't make sense financially, but trust your instincts and then trust your iman. And more than anything, keep going.
Thank you for that advice. So yeah, that's really about it. Thank you for coming on. I do like want to ask you though, like for anyone who wants to connect with you online, where would you recommend they connect with you?
So I more than anything, I would recommend Instagram. That's more where most of my followers are at. That's the best way to connect with me currently. And then my handle is at noras.bakery_. But you can also reach out to me on my phone number or by email. Email would be info@norasbakery.ca. And then phone number is 647-569-9339. I also have a website as well, so that's where you can check out all of my contacts options all in one place. And then there's a contact form on there as well to fill out if you ever have a custom inquiry. And the website is norasbakery.com.
And that's a wrap. If this episode inspired you, subscribe and share it with one friend who needs this nudge. Follow Nora online and don't miss her Egyptian-inspired cheesecake jars. Perfect for Ramadan. Until next time, keep your hustle graceful and your dreams loud.